Today we're discussing this new lens from Sigma. This is their 50mm f1.4 Art DGDN, which is their new design for mirrorless, different than the older adapted mirrorless 50mm DG HSM, I believe it was called, which is basically a big chonker of the original, Canon lens with the Sony E adapter like built into it. This is designed specifically for mirrorless, like they did with the 35 and the 85 more recently. And you can get this lens in L mount and Sony E mount. I've got the E mount version here, and I borrowed this lens from Sigma. Obviously, the video's not sponsored by Sigma. They just lent it to me to make this review. It's going to go back when the video's done. They don't get any input on this video's production. They don't get to see it before it's posted. But I also borrowed some other stuff, including from Camera Canada, the original E mount 50mm DG HSM I was talking about from Sigma, as well as the Zeiss 50mm 1.4 Planar for comparison to this lens. And from Sony, I asked to borrow their A7R5 because I wanted to check all these lenses with the highest megapixels I could get with the latest autofocus, etc. And also a note on mechanical shutter. And I also tested with the A1, but I switched the A7R5 when I was able to borrow that from Sony. It's really, really wintry out and really bright and snowy and that kind of thing. So I'm shooting at a high shutter speed. And if we're going to talk about like bokeh quality and stuff like that, if you shoot at a high shutter speed with electronic front curtain, you can actually create some different effects with the bokeh. And so it's not necessarily a fair comparison. And the A1 doesn't have the ability to turn off the electronic front curtain. You're either in mechanical with the electronic front curtain or you're in electronic. There's no individual options. Where other cameras, A7 IV, A7 III, A7R5, have the ability to be in mechanical and turn the electronic front curtain off. So that's why I decided to do those tests with the A7R5. But moving on to the actual physical design of this lens. So this is similar, like I said, to the more recent 35mm that Sigma's made. And it reminds me, sort of a Sony G Master in what they've added to it. So you've got your aperture ring, which comes with an aperture lock, which I appreciate so that I don't get stuck halfway between something or change my aperture when I don't want to. And you can set it to clicked or declicked, depending on how you like to use that. There's an AF/MF switch and a function button. It has a 72mm front filter diameter, and the front lens element is protected against, oil and water and that kind of thing. Has a coating on it. And as far as weather sealing, it's rated as being dust and splash resistant, but it's not as weather sealed as the sports lenses because this is an art lens, although it does have a small little rubber gasket around the lens mount. Regarding the sports lens comparison, this is the first art lens and one of the few of Sigma's lenses to have now high-powered linear actuators for their focus motors. I think they're actually called HLA now, which is like high responsive linear actuators or something like that. And I think the previous lens that had that was the Sigma 60 to 600, that sports lens. So this one now, I don't think even the 35 and 85 have it, is the first one that has those like zip, 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 really fast linear motors that are silent, quick. You can really feel the difference for a Sigma lens, if you will, when you put it on like a modern Sony body and you just go from infinity to minimum. It's super fast, silent, works great in video. So autofocus is fantastic. When it comes to manual focus, it's the same kind of thing that Sigma's been doing for a little while now, where you have a really well dampened, large focus ring for manual focus, but it's not linear, meaning that if you turn it faster, it moves more than if you turn it slower. But if you do turn it somewhat slowly, because I feel like when people are trying to do focus pulls, they're not like jamming it. If you do turn it somewhat slowly, the throw is really long. So you actually can get precise manual focus. It's just not really repeatable is what I would say. So depending on what's important to there. And then if we take a look at some focus breathing here, this is the new Sigma, and we can see that it breathes quite a bit. Based on the tape measure, we can see that it's moving over an inch on the tape measure. And the old Sigma here actually moves less than an inch, so the focus breathing is better on the old Sigma. And then the Zeiss is somewhere in between. It moves slightly more than an inch, but not as bad as the new Sigma, but worse still than the old Sigma. And then as far as some more physical comparisons, this is the best one of these three, in my opinion, when it comes to how it feels on a Sony body. It feels like it balances better and, feels better in the hand, where obviously with the original one, it's much longer. So if you want to see a little comparison here. So, and where the sort of center of gravity is, it really has sort of like a tipping forward feel when it's on the lens. So that's an improvement. And then compared to the Planar, which, is not that different in terms of height, but this one is much girthier, and it just feels heavy and bulky. Also, because it's so much thicker, there's tripod plate issues that I kind of forgot about because I haven't used the lens in a while, that when you put them on a Sony mirrorless camera, which are pretty compact, that it actually, sits almost the same distance down from the body. So if you put a long plate on it, it'll actually hit against the lens, which is annoying and doesn't happen on the Sigma. All right, so here's some sample images. Like I said, it's winter here, so you're gonna get a lot of snowy photos. So look at this shot here, nothing fancy, but it just has some branches against a bright background. And look at all of the fringing, basically, on all these branches. You see this red? And over here you can see that it's green and then more red. Kind of fits with the Christmas colors of the winter, but it's not supposed to be red and green on all these branches. And it happened in quite a few of the images that I captured as well. Another example would be this one here. Again, all of these little branches have a red fringing on them, and it's rather pronounced, which is what made me want to test all 3 lenses on the test charts to compare. I was like, is my lens flawed? Because this seems like way too much chromatic aberration, and way more than I remember when I used to use the older art lenses. So I reached out to Sigma, and they said that it doesn't appear to be anything wrong with the photos I sent based on them assessing my raw images. So let's look at the charts that I shot then. This is the DGDN here, this is the new one. So if we punch in right here, this is where I focused, and we can see that there is some longitudinal chromatic aberration, Bokeh, going this way. We get that, like I said, that green and that red here. But if we compare this to the original art lens, the HSM art lens, and we punch in, it's actually worse. The original art lens was worse. I guess I'm not remembering what these 50mm 1.4 art lenses look like. And this one's like, neon green and purple. So it's even sort of like a worse coloring, in my opinion, in terms of it standing out. And even more sort of like laterally along this line here, do we see that fringing? This is the Planar here. And I would actually say that it's quite comparable to, maybe a little bit better, to the new Sigma. We can do a little side-by-side here. Yeah, I mean, what do you think? Pretty similar, I would say, in terms of, how much of that red magenta and how much of the teal color we're getting in the frame. So, bang for the buck, we're getting the same or better than the Zeiss for less money. But it's not perfect. I would say the biggest issue that I have with the Sigma version is that it seems to show up really pronounced in these type of wintry scenes. It just happen to be unfortunate because it's winter here, so you're getting all that fringing all over those branches if you're shooting out in the snow. And then I did this kind of chart as well. This is the new DGDN, and Lightroom corrections are off. So you can see how much distortion the 50mm actually has. Hey, Editor Gerald here. I just wanted to make a quick note about something that I didn't mention in the original recording, which is that Sigma actually sent over a Lightroom profile. I don't think anybody's ever done that before. Normally you get the lens, then you have to, decide how to compare it, whether without profiles or with profiles, because you don't have the profile yet for the brand new lens. But in this case, I do, so I can actually show you the distortion and vignetting, both profile on and off. So we just discussed off. Now, if we look at these ones here, so here I have the new Sigma with that pin cushion distortion. And if I enable the profile corrections, we can see that the distortion is mostly corrected. As well, we're getting some vignetting correction. The peripheral illumination it's brightening up around the outside edges there, as you can see. And if we compare that to the old Sigma art lens, on and off, we can see that the distortion isn't really changing that much, but there is some vignetting correction going on, but not as much. And then the Zeiss here, again, has a little bit of pin cushion to be corrected, which we can see there, and a little bit of peripheral illumination, the vignetting correction, but not as much. Okay, now let's talk about bokeh. So this is at f1.4, minimum focus. This is as big as the orbs are gonna get, and we can take a closer look at them. Yikes. They're good in the sense that they are pretty even throughout and not much of sort of an outer thing. They're a little bit busy on the inside though. And as we move out toward the edge, we are getting a bit of a cat's eye effect going on. And then if we stop down to F2, we're mostly rounding out. We do still have a little bit of something going on here though, as far as, cutting in to the circles. And the 11-bladed iris is doing well to maintain circular performance at F2. I would say that the old Sigma on the right actually appears to have less cat's eye effect. It might be slightly smoother. Okay, they did well. The new Sigma removes some of this outer ring, which is nice, but perhaps the insides, the sort of onion rings or whatever you want to call this, is maybe less noticeable on the old Sigma. Really, we're getting pretty nitpicky here. If you were to just do it as a glance like this, you would probably say that's the same lens. Okay, now if we compare to the Zeiss is quite smooth at times, but I think we can definitely see the blades a little bit more pronounced on the Zeiss than we can on the Sigma. All right, now we've just got another detail, sharpness, and color comparison here as I stop down to sort of see what the sweet spot is on these lenses. So this is the new Sigma, the DG DN. I know that this is the new Sigma because of the red fringing on the text. It's not supposed to look like that. As we stop down though, we get rid of it. As far as sharpness though, it's good, by the way. So let's stop down to f2, and it subsides pretty significantly, and the detail does improve. So there's a significant improvement going f2, and then even f2.8, I'm seeing better clarity in this strange text up here. And then at this point, the aberration is almost completely gone. If we switch back to the 1.4 and then back to the 2.8, you can really see. This is the old HSM Art. So at 1.4, we're going to see some of that purple around it. And if we go to f2, again, noticeable improvement. f2.8, not as much of an improvement. But now when comparing those f2.0s on both lenses, yeah, I would say they're actually pretty similar. This is a tough call. As it moves across the frame though, there's an advantage for the new Sigma. Can definitely see that here. Yeah, definitely, the new Sigma definitely has an advantage as you move out toward the edge. Okay, now let's take a look at the Zeiss. This is the Planar 1.4. Again, not as bad with aberration. We're not seeing that red outline, but still pretty soft. f2, decent improvement. f2.8, significant improvement. Here we can see when we compare the 2.8 of the new Sigma on the left to the 2.8 of the Planar on the right, that at 2.8 the Planar wins both in center sharpness and just basically throughout the frame. Yeah, this is sharper on the right. And the text here, yeah, it's significant advantage. So if you're getting this lens to shoot wide open, they're all within a certain realm of being comparable. As you stop down, the Planar wins. And in the corners, the Planar, both lenses actually beat the old Sigma, and the Planar maybe beats the new Sigma a little bit. But as far as wide open per dollar, the new Sigma is probably the winner. Best performance in the first couple stops probably still goes to the Planar. But per dollar, I don't know if you can justify paying the Planar price anymore. As far as color reproduction, by the way, while we're in here, I actually find the Zeiss to be maybe the most neutral. A little bit magenta, but fairly neutral. The old Sigma is quite warm, and the new Sigma is a little bit less. It's halfway in between the old Sigma and the Zeiss. But the Zeiss, I think, probably has the best color. Then let's talk about close focusing. So these images are as close as I could get to the Rubik's Cube while keeping the center text as sharp as I could as well. This one here is the old HSM Sigma. Really, really good. Let's zoom right in here. Really, really good sharpness for the center here and overall size. If we compare to the new Sigma, we're actually getting pretty similar results. The new Sigma is maybe slightly sharper. And if we look at the size of the Rubik's Cube, new, old, but compared to the Zeiss, a little bit further away, as you can see. And I tried quite a few shots on the Zeiss to get the center to look as sharp as the Sigmas. If we compare this one to that one, you can see it's a little bit softer, and I just couldn't. I tried manual focusing, I tried doing a high burst where I would like move like an increment at a time, tried using autofocus, and it just wasn't quite as sharp when close focusing. So if you do a lot of close focusing, the either Sigma will give you a sharper little details in the center of the, the little object that you're trying to bring up than you will on the Planar. But then again, if you're trying to do close focusing, 50 mil sucks for close focusing. All these ones, they're all in the same zone of like a 0.4 meters. I'll tell you what the new Sigma is. 0.45 meters, 1.45 feet. And pretty much any 50 mil I've ever used is in that kind of like 0.4 to 0.45 meters, which mixed with the focal length means that you're not going to get that good of macro reproduction. So 50 mil is just, that's not where it shines at all. But if you need a 50 mil and you also like to close focus, then the Sigmas do perform better in this regard. And then this one's to see what Bokeh looks like when, shooting something in an actual let's call it a practical environment. I mean, nobody who shoots a fence like this, but it really highlights if there's much of a local problem. And there's some, as we saw on the chart, that there is some fringing here, and there's some fringing as we go out of focus of the direction. It doesn't show up as badly in a shot like this as it does with flat branches against the background. That sort of red, lateral mixed with the green, like those backlit branches are horrendous on the new Sigma. Do not get it for that purpose. But, in a scene like this where there's a lot of depth and complexity, it's not as bad. And then this is just some detail shots, whatever. I was just trying to see, what the little micro contrasts look like when you get some sunlight on a texture. And I was quite pleased with just sort of the overall texture of these shots. I think that it looks pretty good. In these examples, I was happy with the detail. Looks good. And then Sunstars and flare, really pronounced Sunstars I found on this lens compared to some other ones that I've done, recently. But there is also some flare. I would say that compared to the G Masters, I'm noticing actually more pronounced Sunstars on this lens, but slightly worse flare, if that's worth anything to you. And then I did this shot to get some sort of like what we'll call natural bokeh instead of shooting fairy lights. And so if I out of focus the background and focus instead on something up close, this is what the out of focus orbs look like on the new Sigma. And pretty much the same result. We're getting cat's eyeing over here, but reasonably smooth when in the center of the frame. Only a couple like this one are we seeing any of that sort of onion ringing, but overall, pretty good result. So really, there's not a lot to complain about with this new Sigma lens. It really is a great option. I don't love the chromatic aberration in certain scenes, but in other scenes, it's equal to the Planar, but for much cheaper. So I would say the biggest difference when it comes to optical quality, if I already owned one of these 50mm lenses, I don't know that I would say it's worth selling or switching or whatever. If you were a new customer to 50mm, you needed a new 50mm lens for your Sony system, let's say, then this is probably the one that I would buy, just due to size and weight and pretty similar optical quality. But the autofocus is probably the biggest difference. So if there's two reasons to actually sell what you got to switch to this one, it would be size and weight if you're breaking your back with the old lenses or you're just not comfortable using them, or you need much better autofocus performance or video autofocus performance, then this lens is night and day better. And if you're looking for a new lens for video, again, this is the one to get compared to these two. Now, before I go, for my fellow YouTubers and content creators out there, I want to tell you about this promotion going on with vidIQ. vidIQ, for those of you that don't know, is a suite of tools that helps creators grow their YouTube channel by providing extremely useful insights into a past video's performance and tips and ideas to accelerate future videos. I've used a few of these platforms throughout my YouTube journey, but vidIQ is definitely the best and the one I recommend most. And my favorite new feature by far is the integration of AI into their platform for both helping generate titles and video ideas, but also this new AI YouTube coach that's powered by ChatGPT. I can't easily put into words how useful and entertaining this technology is for YouTube planning, but it's a game changer. Now, while vidIQ does have several different pricing options depending on your needs, the AI functions are soon going to be limited to the Boost plan or higher, which costs $49 per month. But as a vidIQ partner, I'm able to offer my viewers a 30-day trial for just $1, which will include all the AI tools as well. After the trial, the price will return to normal, but this gives you a chance to see if it's useful for your channel and growth. Now, for full transparency, vidIQ isn't paying directly for this video, but they are offering me a substantial cut of the revenue generated by any of your signups and recurring monthly payments, which is something I appreciate because there's a lot of lousy affiliate programs out there, but vidIQ isn't one of them. So if you like this channel, know that you'll also be supporting me directly by signing up for vidIQ, while also getting incredible tools to help grow your own channel quickly. Thanks for listening, and thanks for watching the video. All right, I'm done.